In the quiet, tree-lined streets of Millfield, a small town where everyone knew each other's names, for friends had grown up like family. Jake, Ryan, Mia, and Leah were inseparable from the moment they met in elementary school, their bond forged through shared secrets, reckless adventures, and the kind of loyalty that only childhood friendships could create. Jake, the group's unofficial leader, was a rough-around-the-edges mechanic with a heart of gold, always ready to help a friend in need. Ryan, charming and ambitious, had built a successful real estate business, though rumors swirled about how he'd gotten so rich so fast. Mia, the responsible one, worked long hours as a nurse, playing peacekeeper whenever tensions flared. And then there was Leah, the free-spirited artist who struggled to make ends meet, relying on Jake's generosity more than she liked to admit. 4 years, their friendship seemed unbreakable. They celebrated birthdays together, crashed on each other's couches after late nights, and even covered for one another when trouble came knocking. But as they got older, cracks began to form. Ryan's flashy lifestyle grated on Leah, who resented his constant bragging while she scraped by on ramen noodles and second-hand paints. Jake, though always willing to lend her money, started making passive-aggressive comments about her lack of stability. Mia tried to mediate, but even she couldn't ignore the growing tension. Then came the incident at Ryan's latest property deal, a rundown apartment complex he'd purchased for cheap, promising renovations that never came. When a fire broke out in one of the units, a tenant barely escaped with their life. The news shook the town, but Ryan brushed it off, calling it an accident. Jake, however, wasn't so sure. He'd heard whispers about Ryan cutting corners, bribing inspectors, even paying off unhappy tenants to keep quiet. When he confronted Ryan, their argument turned explosive. Mia managed to calm them down, but Leah, who had been unusually quiet that night, left without saying a word. Days later, Jake started digging. He combed through public records, asked around at the local diner where construction workers gossiped, and even followed Ryan one night, convinced his friend was hiding something. What he found was worse than he imagined: forged documents, fake safety inspections, and a trail of payoffs leading straight back to Ryan. But before Jake could decide what to do with the information, he vanished. His garage was left in disarray, tools scattered as if he'd been interrupted mid-repair. His phone sat on the counter, unanswered calls piling up. At first, his friends assumed he'd taken off to clear his head. Jake had done that before after big fights. But when days passed with no word, Mia filed a missing persons report. The police were skeptical, writing it off as another adult choosing to disappear. But Leah's nervous glances and Ryan's sudden trip out of town raised suspicions. And then the rumors started. A gas station clerk swore she saw Jake and Ryan arguing near the old train tracks the night he disappeared. A neighbor reported hearing raised voices from Jake's garage late that evening. And when detectives asked Mia where she'd been that night, her alibi didn't quite add up. Something was wrong. The friendship that had once seemed unshakable was now a tangled web of lies, jealousy, and betrayal. And as the investigation deepened, one thing became clear: someone in Jake's inner circle knew exactly what had happened to him. The only question was, who stood to gain the most from his disappearance? The days following Jake's disappearance felt like a slow unraveling of everything the friends had once known. At first, Ryan acted concerned, joining search parties and offering a reward for information. But his behavior was off, too polished, too rehearsed. He avoided direct questions, deflecting with vague answers about Jake's reckless habits. Meanwhile, Leah grew increasingly withdrawn, jumping at every knock on the door. Mia, usually the steady one, found herself caught between suspicion and denial, refusing to believe anyone in their circle could be involved. Then, the first real clue surfaced. A construction worker who frequented Jake's garage came forward, telling police he'd seen Jake arguing with Ryan near the abandoned train yard the night he vanished. The worker didn't hear details, but Jake's voice had been loud, angry, uncharacteristic for the usually easygoing mechanic. When detectives questioned Ryan, he claimed they'd only talked about a business deal, nothing serious. But his story shifted under pressure. First, he said they'd parted on good terms. Then, when pressed, he admitted they'd fought but insisted Jake had stormed off alone. The police grew suspicious, especially when Ryan's alibi fell apart. He said he'd been home all night, but his security cameras, normally always recording, had conveniently malfunctioned. Even stranger, his phone records showed a flurry of calls to an unknown number in the hours after Jake was last seen. Ryan dismissed it as a client, but the timing was too coincidental. Meanwhile, Leah's behavior raised eyebrows. She'd always been broke, suddenly paying off months of back rent in cash. When Mia asked where the money came from, Leah stammered about an art commission, but her eyes darted away. Then, a telltale slip, she mentioned Ryan's name in passing, quickly correcting herself. Mia didn't press, but the seed of doubt was planted. Then came the discovery that changed everything. Searching Jake's garage for clues, detectives found a hidden compartment in his toolbox. Inside was a flash drive containing files, incriminating documents on Ryan's real estate scams, including falsified inspection reports and evidence of bribes. Worse, there were photos of the burned apartment building, along with notes suggesting the fire wasn't an accident. Jake had been building a case against Ryan, and now he was gone. The police turned up the heat, questioning Leah again. This time, she cracked. Through tears, she admitted Ryan had paid her to set up a meeting with Jake, claiming it was just to talk things out. She swore she didn't know what would happen, but the guilt was eating her alive. The money, the lies, it all made sense now. Yet, something still didn't add up. If Ryan had killed Jake, where was the body? And why had Mia been deleting files from Jake's laptop the night he disappeared? The deeper the investigation went, the clearer it became. This wasn't just one betrayal, but many. And the friends who had once sworn to protect each other were now trapped in a web of their own making, each with something to hide. The investigation took a darker turn when detectives uncovered Ryan's financial records. Behind the facade of his successful real estate business lay a labyrinth of shell companies and suspicious transactions. Large sums had been funneled to offshore accounts, and payments labeled as contractor fees traced back to known arsonists. Most damning of all was a $50,000 withdrawal made the day after Jake disappeared, to an account later linked to Leah. When confronted, Leah broke down, confessing Ryan had promised her the money to keep quiet about what happened at the train yard. But she insisted she never believed Jake would be hurt, let alone killed. Meanwhile, forensic teams combed through Ryan's properties. In the basement of a vacant warehouse he owned, they found traces of blood matching Jake's type. The space had been hastily cleaned, but luminol revealed drag marks leading to a storm drain outside. Cadaver dogs picked up a scent trail ending abruptly at the edge of Millfield Creek, a location Ryan had visited the night Jake vanished, according to his cell tower data. Yet without a body, prosecutors hesitated to file murder charges, focusing instead on the mountain of fraud evidence. Then came the twist no one expected. While searching Leah's tiny apartment, detectives found a sketchbook buried under her bed. The pages were filled with hurried drawings, not her usual vibrant landscapes, but dark, frantic sketches of Ryan and Jake arguing, a shadowy figure watching from the trees, and finally, a chilling image of a body wrapped in tarp near the creek. When asked about them, Leah claimed they were just ideas for a graphic novel, but the details were too precise. The exact pattern of Jake's favorite jacket, the distinctive chipped handle of Ryan's shovel. Most disturbing was what investigators found next. Tucked between the sketches was a receipt for a storage unit rented under a fake name. Inside, police discovered Jake's missing phone, a blood-stained hoodie, and, most bizarrely, Mia's hospital ID badge. The timeline collapsed when security footage showed Mia accessing the storage facility twice in the week after Jake disappeared. Suddenly, the quiet nurse's perfect alibi crumbled. Her claim of working a double shift the night Jake vanished was contradicted by hospital records showing she'd clocked out early. The pieces began forming a terrifying picture. Ryan had motive. Jake was about to expose his crimes. Leah had opportunity. She'd lured Jake to the meeting spot. But Mia, her involvement made no sense until detectives pulled her internet history. Searches for undetectable poisons and how long before a body decomposes in water dated back months before Jake went missing. The most damning search came just hours after his disappearance. Can luminol detect bleach after 48 hours? As the net tightened, the friends turned on each other. Ryan accused Leah of blackmailing him. Leah screamed that Mia had manipulated them all. And Mia, she stopped talking altogether, requesting a lawyer the moment detectives mentioned the storage unit. The town reeled as the truth emerged. This wasn't just a falling out among friends. It was a carefully constructed betrayal, with each person playing their part in Jake's disappearance. But with no body and 3 conflicting stories, prosecutors faced an impossible question. Had they uncovered a murder conspiracy, or was the real mastermind still hiding in plain sight? The case took its most shocking turn when an anonymous tip led police to a remote hunting cabin deep in the woods outside Millfield, a property Ryan had purchased under one of his shell companies 6 months earlier. Inside, investigators made a grisly discovery: blood spatter matching Jake's DNA on the floorboards, along with strands of his hair caught in the cracks of an old wooden chair. But the most disturbing find was a single bullet casing lodged beneath the fridge, its caliber matching Ryan's registered handgun. The cabin's fireplace showed signs of recent, intense heat, and forensic teams sifted through the ashes to find fragments of bone. The implications were horrifying. Had Jake not just been killed, but his remains burned to destroy evidence? Leah's sketchbook suddenly took on new significance. Detectives realized her drawings weren't just imaginative renderings, they were a subconscious record of what she'd witnessed. The shadowy figure in her sketches matched Mia's build perfectly, and the positioning of the tarp-wrapped body aligned with drag marks found at the cabin. When confronted with this, Leah collapsed into hysterics, finally admitting she'd been present that night but insisting Mia had orchestrated everything. According to Leah, Mia had drugged Jake's coffee earlier that evening, explaining his disoriented state during the confrontation with Ryan. She claimed Mia had promised the whole thing would just be a scare tactic to stop Jake from exposing Ryan's crimes. Meanwhile, digital forensic experts made a breakthrough with Jake's recovered phone. Deleted messages revealed a heated exchange between Jake and Mia from the day before his disappearance. Jake had written, "I know what you took from Ryan's safe. You're just as guilty as he is." Mia's response was chilling in its simplicity, "Then you leave me no choice." Even more damning was a voicemail recovered from Jake's network provider, a panicked message left for his sister that was never sent, cut off mid-sentence with the sound of a woman's voice saying, "Give me that," in the background. Voice analysis identified the speaker as Mia with 92% certainty. Ryan, sensing the walls closing in, attempted to strike a deal with prosecutors. He offered to testify that Mia had approached him weeks earlier with a plan to silence Jake permanently, providing text messages showing Mia's detailed instructions about the cabin's location and the need to clean thoroughly afterward. But Ryan's credibility was destroyed when jailhouse phone calls leaked, recordings of him telling an unidentified caller to remind Leah what happens to snitches. The caller's response? An eerily calm female voice saying, "She'll keep quiet. She knows what I'm capable of." As autumn leaves fell over Millfield, the horrifying truth became clear. This wasn't a crime of passion or a simple falling out. It was a cold, calculated elimination with each participant playing their role. Ryan's financial resources, Leah's manipulation of Jake's trust, and Mia's medical knowledge making her the architect of the perfect crime. Yet for all their planning, they'd underestimated one thing: the loyalty of Jake's oldest friend. His sister, refusing to believe the official narrative, had been quietly gathering evidence of her own. And what she'd uncovered would change everything. The final chapter of this twisted tale began with a bombshell revelation. Jake's sister Sarah had been secretly recording conversations with all 3 suspects for weeks. Her recordings captured Ryan admitting to being at the cabin, Leah sobbing about never meaning for it to go this far, and most damningly, Mia calmly explaining how to dispose of a body using hospital-grade chemicals. But the real shock came when Sarah handed detectives a memory card containing security footage from Jake's own garage, time-stamped the night he disappeared. The grainy video showed Mia arriving first, slipping something into Jake's coffee mug. Then Ryan appeared, his face twisted in rage as he waved a gun. Leah stood frozen in the corner, hands over her mouth. As Jake slumped in his chair, the footage ended abruptly, but not before capturing Mia picking up Jake's phone and deleting files with clinical precision. Forensic accountants made another breakthrough. Mia had been embezzling drugs from the hospital for months, building a stash of sedatives and paralytics. Text messages showed Ryan had paid her $30,000 from one of his shell companies just 2 days before Jake vanished, labeled as a medical consultation fee. The most chilling discovery came when police searched Mia's childhood home. Buried in her old bedroom closet was a notebook filled with disturbingly detailed plans, dating back years, outlining how to commit the perfect murder. The last entry, written the week before Jake disappeared, contained a sketched diagram of the hunting cabin with notes about fireplace heat distribution and bone fragmentation rates. The case collapsed spectacularly at trial. Leah, granted immunity for her testimony, broke down describing how Mia had manipulated them all, first convincing Ryan that Jake would destroy his business, then preying on Leah's financial desperation. But the smoking gun came when prosecutors played a recovered voicemail Jake had left on his own cloud storage by accident. a recording of his final moments where Mia could be heard saying, "You should have taken the money when I offered it." Ryan received 25 years for manslaughter and fraud, while Leah walked free with probation for her cooperation. Mia, the mastermind who thought she'd planned the perfect crime, was convicted of first-degree murder and sentenced to life without parole. In the end, the town of Millfield was left reeling, not just by the brutality of the crime, but by the sheer depth of betrayal. These weren't strangers or casual acquaintances. They were lifelong friends who had shared birthdays, holidays, and secrets. The case left an unsettling question haunting the community. If people who had loved each other since childhood could do this, who could you ever really trust? Jake's body was never recovered, but his family erected a memorial near the train tracks where he'd played as a child. The inscription read simply, "Betrayal doesn't come from enemies." As for the hunting cabin, it burned to the ground under mysterious circumstances the night after Mia's conviction, a final, eerie echo of the destruction she had set in motion.